All right, so today we're going to talk about something called reciprocal teaching. We're actually going to talk about it for quite a few days. Let's look at the title, reciprocal teaching, and think about what we know about those two words, reciprocal. Maybe you've heard that word in math. I know when I taught math, students would have to take the reciprocal of a fraction in order to do an algorithm for division. Reciprocal is when you switch something around, so it's the opposite. And then teaching, I think you guys are all experts in teaching. You've been on the receiving end of it for a long time now that you're in middle school. Reciprocal teaching is when we flip things around. So it's a procedure where we apply some reading strategies to help understand the text more. And over time, you take over the role of leading the discussion about it. And then eventually, once you teach something, they say you can do it better. If you can teach something, you've mastered it. And so how cool would it be if you've been able to master all of these reading strategies? So it's only going to help you not just in my ELA class, but also in your other classes where the older you get, the more reading you're going to have and the more difficult it's going to get. Even my students that are reading on grade level and are pretty efficient with their reading skills, when you come to something you don't understand, you need to go back to basics and walk yourself through these steps in order to get yourself back on track with your comprehending. So all of these things, we're going to talk about them in discussions, and then eventually it'll just be what goes on in your brain. And it's a strategy for becoming a better reader. Think for a minute about what your purpose for reading is. In school, we have distinct purposes for reading. And it really should be at this point to make meaning from the things that you're reading, meaning that will help you. Sometimes you read to find the answer to a question that's being asked by your teacher. Sometimes you read to collect evidence. Outside of school, we read for pleasure. And believe it or not, our brains do these things, even when we're just reading something that we found that we think is interesting. When I'm reading for my book club, I go through all of these steps in my mind, subconsciously even probably. But when I'm not able to do one of these things, that sends a red flag into my consciousness of like, wait, you better go back. You better go back and check that out again. So strategies are tricks that we can use to win at something, to succeed at something. If you play sports, you know that your coach gives you different strategies to beat the other team. A play would be a strategy. How are you going to get the ball around their defense? Those of you who might be swimmers, strategies include things that you do to make yourself more aerodynamic. So you can swim without a strategy, but you might not accomplish as much as if you do it with a strategy. You can play an instrument, but if you don't have a strategy on how to improve, how to hold the instrument correctly so that you are getting the optimum sound, then you're not going to win at it per se. You're not going to be the best that you can be at it, which is what you're trying to accomplish when you're doing something like playing an instrument. So this visual here that I found, I'm a very generous teacher on the internet that shares ideas. I thought this was a great visual for us to look at. So as you can see here, there's that title, Reciprocal Teaching, and it's for text comprehension. I think you read in all your classes, so this is going to help you everywhere. And these are the 4 strategies that we use in reciprocal teaching. We predict, we make predictions, we draw some inferences, and we predict before and after reading. Clarify. Once we think we've gotten some meaning, we check to think, does this make sense? Same thing in math. When I get an answer in math, I don't just move on. I look at the problem and go, does this make sense? So clarifying things. And if we don't, we use some fix-up strategies. We reread it. We look up new words. Important. We cannot, did you know that you need to know 80 to 90%? I've seen both little sets of data. 80 to 90% of the words in something, you need to know them in order to fully comprehend what you're reading. So if every 5 or 6 words you don't understand it, you don't throw up your hands and give up, you clarify, you look it up. You guys are lucky you have the internet usually right at your fingertips. If not, we have in the classroom hard copies of some really good dictionaries that you can use. And sometimes we use context to clarify. Another strategy that we use is questioning. We pose questions of the author. What were they intending? We pose questions of what's happening there, mostly, though, in this instance. And we try to focus our questioning on what's important. I think in the years, if you've gotten to middle school and you're still struggling with reading, you might have been in situations where people were questioning the text, but not for the purpose of understanding it. Maybe they ask you to think about a time when you were doing something that the character was doing. That type of question doesn't help you comprehend. You need questions that focus you back to the most important things. And so we're going to learn how to do that. And a lot of focusing on the most important things comes with summarizing. Summarizing is halfway up that level of thinking that you need to be doing to move to those higher levels. You're synthesizing all the information, you're looking for the big ideas, and you're looking for what's important. So we're going to talk more about each of these in our lessons. We'll have 4 lessons on these concepts of reciprocal teaching, and then we'll start applying them through we'll call them our dialogues, and we sit down and talk. And the first few times I will lead them, and then eventually I'm going to hand it over to you. We'll be moving into that reciprocal realm. We're going to work in some groups. We're going to have that purposeful dialogue. I'm going to explicitly teach these, model them for you, and then eventually they'll be your responsibility to do them. And here's some of the benefits. As a teacher, before I teach something, I think about how is this going to benefit my students. You may never think about how what you're doing benefits you, but guess what? We're switching the roles up here. So you need to be thinking about how these things will help you. It activates your prior knowledge. If you're making a prediction, you're thinking about what you already know. You're opening those file cabinets in your brain and going, oh, I see a fisherman on the beginning of this. I know some things about fishing, and your brain starts going through those files in that part and pulls it out for you. But maybe it's a fisherman doing fly fishing and you're a deep sea that's some of the things to think about to get your brain going, but you might need more information. It builds social interaction and collaboration. Boys and girls, talking to other people is a really good thing to help us think. I don't process difficult things just by myself, and neither should you. It's going to help develop our leadership in the classroom. I don't need to be the person in charge all the time. You all can learn from each other, in similar ways that you learned from me. Some responsibility. Hey, I'm all about that. You're getting older and you need to be taking responsibility for your learning. But here's what I'll tell you. I've taught this. I remember distinctly being in a classroom of 8th graders once. And, I said, I said something to them about using their reading strategies and, going back and rereading when you don't understand. And a really honest 8th grader, he raised his hand. He said, Miss, I don't know when I don't understand. I don't know, what I'm supposed to be doing here. So I'm wanting you to be responsible, but how can I expect you to be responsible for something if I haven't taught you how to do it? These strategies here are going to be they're going to be little step ladders to help you be more independent with your learning, which I think we all like. And then it promotes flexible thinking, because when you're talking to someone else, they might have something that you've never thought about. And that grows your thinking a little. And then metacognition. That's a big word. But basically, it's the thinking that's going on while you're reading. Okay. All right. So sit tight, and we're going to get started with our first lesson, which will be on. Well, you'll have to switch the page to see what's next. I'm not going to tell you.